Sophie lived in a small, quiet town where nothing exciting ever happened. She spent her days at the local library, reading about adventures in faraway lands, wishing for something extraordinary to happen in her own life. One rainy afternoon, while wandering through the market square, Sophie noticed a small antique shop she had never seen before. The sign above the door read, "Timekeeper's Treasures." Curiosity got the better of her, and she stepped inside. The shop was dimly lit, filled with old clocks, watches, and strange gadgets. The air smelled of dust and oil. "Can I help you, dear?" a deep voice asked. Sophie turned to see an elderly man with a long gray beard and twinkling eyes. "I'm just looking," Sophie said, glancing around the room. Her eyes fell on an old clock sitting on a wooden shelf. It was small and made of silver, with intricate designs carved into its frame. The clock's hands weren't moving, but its surface shimmered as if it were alive. "That's a special one," the shopkeeper said, noticing her interest. "What's so special about it?" Sophie asked, picking it up. "It's said to have the power to stop time," the shopkeeper said with a sly smile. Sophie laughed. "That's impossible." The shopkeeper shrugged. "Maybe it is, or maybe it isn't. Would you like to try it?" Sophie hesitated. "How much does it cost?" "For you it's free," the shopkeeper said. "But remember, every gift comes with a responsibility." Sophie didn't know what he meant, but she couldn't resist. She thanked the man and walked out of the shop with the clock. When she got home, she placed the clock on her bedside table and stared at it. The carving seemed to shimmer faintly in the dim light. "Stop time," she whispered, laughing at the thought. Out of curiosity, she turned the small key at the back of the clock. A soft click echoed in the room, and everything went silent. Sophie blinked. The rain outside had stopped mid-fall. The ticking of the wall clock in her room had gone silent. Even the leaves on the trees outside her window were frozen in place. She stepped outside and waved her hand through the raindrops. They didn't move. "It really works," Sophie whispered, her heart racing. Sophie couldn't believe her eyes. The world around her was frozen in place. She ran through the rain, marveling at how every droplet hung in midair like tiny glass beads. "This is incredible," she whispered, her voice echoing in the eerie silence. She wandered through her quiet town, amazed at what she saw. People were frozen mid-step, conversations paused mid-sentence. A little boy stood with his kite stuck in the air, and a street vendor's cart was tipped over, with apples floating just above the ground. "It's like the whole world is holding its breath," Sophie said to herself. At first, the power felt exciting. Sophie used the clock to sneak into the candy shop and take a few chocolates, leaving her coins on the counter before anyone noticed. She even went into the library and read books for hours, stopping time so she wouldn't have to leave when the librarian closed the doors. "This clock is amazing," Sophie thought. But as the days passed, she began to notice strange things. The more she used the clock, the heavier it felt in her hands. Sometimes she heard faint whispers when she turned the key, though no one else was around. One evening, Sophie decided to visit the market again, curious to see how far the clock's power could reach. As she stopped time and wandered through the frozen stalls, she noticed something strange. A man was moving. He wasn't frozen like everyone else. He was tall, dressed in a long black coat, and he carried a pocket watch that shimmered like Sophie's clock. "Who is that?" Sophie whispered, hiding behind a fruit stand. The man seemed to sense her presence. He turned slowly, his piercing blue eyes locking onto her. "You shouldn't have that clock," he said, his voice low and commanding. Sophie's heart raced. "Who are you?" "I'm the timekeeper," he said, stepping closer. "And you've made a mistake." "What mistake?" Sophie asked, gripping the clock tightly. "The clock wasn't meant for you," the timekeeper said. "Every time you use it, you disturb the balance of time. If you keep going, you could break it entirely." Sophie shook her head. "But I didn't mean to cause any harm. The shopkeeper gave it to me." The timekeeper frowned. "The shopkeeper? Describe him." Sophie hesitated. "An old man with a beard. He said the clock was a gift." The timekeeper's expression darkened. "He's not a shopkeeper. He's a thief who steals time from others. And now he's tricked you into doing the same." "What do you mean?" Sophie asked, her voice trembling. The timekeeper held up his pocket watch. Time is fragile, Sophie. When you stop it, you take it away from the world. If you use the clock too much, it could unravel everything. Sophie looked down at the clock in her hands, the carvings glowing faintly. How do I fix it? The timekeeper studied her carefully. There's only one way. You must return the clock to the Tower of Time, where it belongs. But the journey won't be easy. Sophie hesitated, staring at the clock in her hands. Its faint glow seemed to pulse, almost as if it were alive. Where is the Tower of Time? She asked. The timekeeper pointed to the horizon. Far beyond this town, in the Valley of Echoes. You'll know it when you see it. But you must hurry. The more you use the clock, the more unstable time becomes. Sophie nodded, determined. I'll do it. But will you help me? The timekeeper's blue eyes softened. I can guide you, but the path is yours to walk. The challenges you face will be yours alone. With that, he turned and began walking toward the edge of town. Sophie followed, clutching the clock tightly. As they left the village, the landscape began to change. The trees became taller, their twisted branches forming eerie shadows. The air grew colder, and Sophie felt a strange hum in the ground beneath her feet. What is this place? She asked. The edges of time, the timekeeper replied. Here, the rules of the world begin to blur. You must stay focused, or you'll lose your way. They reached a fork in the path. One trail led into a dense, dark forest, while the other disappeared into a swirling mist. Which way do we go? Sophie asked, looking between the two paths. The timekeeper pointed to the mist. Through there. But be careful. This is the mist of memories. It will show you things you've forgotten, or things you wish you could forget. Sophie hesitated but stepped into the mist. The air was heavy, and strange whispers surrounded her. Sophie, a soft voice called. She turned and saw a figure in the distance. It was her grandmother, who had passed away years ago. Grandma, Sophie whispered, tears welling up in her eyes. The figure smiled and held out her hand. Come here, my dear. Let's go home. Sophie took a step forward, but the timekeeper's voice rang out sharply. It's not real, Sophie. Keep moving. She froze, torn between the comforting image of her grandmother and the urgency in the timekeeper's voice. Sophie, the figure called again, her voice sweeter this time. Taking a deep breath, Sophie turned away and ran through the mist. The whispers grew louder, but she kept going, clutching the clock as if it were her lifeline. Finally, the mist cleared, and she stumbled onto a rocky plain. The timekeeper was waiting for her. You did well, he said. Sophie wiped her eyes. That was harder than I thought. The mist of memories tries to trap you in the past, the timekeeper said. But the only way to move forward is to let go. In the distance, Sophie saw a tall, crumbling tower rising into the sky. Its surface shimmered faintly, as if it were caught between two worlds. The Tower of Time, she whispered. Yes, the timekeeper said. But reaching it is only the first step. The real challenge lies inside. Sophie stood at the base of the Tower of Time, its crumbling walls stretching high into the cloudy sky. The closer she got, the louder the clock in her hands hummed, as if it were alive. What's inside? Sophie asked, her voice steady but filled with curiosity. The timekeeper gazed up at the tower. The heart of time, it holds the past, present, and future in balance. But to return the clock, you must prove yourself worthy. Worthy of what? Sophie asked. To move forward, the timekeeper said. To let go of control over time and accept it for what it is. Sophie nodded, her determination outweighing her fear. She climbed the stone steps and entered the tower. The air inside was cool and still, and the walls glowed faintly with swirling patterns of light. In the center of the room was a massive hourglass, its sands suspended mid-flow. As Sophie approached, a deep voice filled the chamber. Why have you come? I've come to return the clock, Sophie said, holding it up. It doesn't belong to me. The voice replied, and why did you use it? Sophie hesitated. Because I was curious. I wanted to see what it could do, but I didn't mean to harm anyone. The voice grew softer. Curiosity is natural, but power must be handled with care. To restore the balance, you must face the test of time. Are you ready? I'm ready, Sophie said, though her hands trembled slightly. The hourglass began to glow, and the sands inside it shifted, creating 3 separate streams. Each stream formed a glowing doorway in the air. Choose your path, the past, the present, or the future, the voice said. Sophie looked at the doors, each one shimmering with a different light. I'll choose the present, she said. The moment she stepped through the doorway, she found herself back in her village. Everything looked normal, but as she walked through the streets, she realized something was wrong. The people were frozen, not by time, but by fear. They stood still, their eyes wide and their expressions filled with worry. What's happening? Sophie asked aloud. The voice echoed around her. This is the present you created. By stopping time, you taught the world to fear its movement. Now, they're trapped in stillness. Tears welled up in Sophie's eyes. I didn't mean to do this. You can fix it, the voice said, but you must act now. Do you have the courage to let go of control and trust time to move as it should? Sophie looked at the clock in her hands. Its carvings glowed faintly, as if waiting for her decision. Taking a deep breath, she turned the key at the back of the clock. Instead of stopping time, she wound it forward. The moment she did, the frozen people began to move, their fear melting away. The scene around her dissolved, and Sophie found herself back in the tower. The hourglass glowed brightly, and the deep voice spoke again. You have passed the test. You understand that time must move forward, no matter how uncertain it may feel. The timekeeper appeared beside her, smiling. You've done it, Sophie. The clock can now be returned to its rightful place. Sophie walked up to the hourglass and placed the clock on its base. The carvings on the clock glowed, and the hourglass's sands began to flow freely once more. The entire tower lit up with a golden light, and Sophie felt a sense of peace wash over her. As the light faded, the timekeeper turned to her. Time will always move forward, Sophie. You've learned to trust it, and that is the greatest lesson of all. Sophie smiled, her heart lighter than it had been in days. Thank you for guiding me. The timekeeper nodded. The clock no longer belongs to you, but its wisdom will always stay with you. Sophie stepped out of the tower and into a world that felt alive again. The stars sparkled brightly, and the hum of time moving forward was steady and comforting. From that day on, Sophie cherished each moment, knowing that time was not something to control, but something to trust.